questions that are wrong or one is not being asked. People are in the head wanting to ask, they are afraid. So, you got it? What about you? All right, so I'm gonna get this to Deacon. You got one, too. I want you to take it apart to the best of your ability. No, that's taking it apart. Mr. Barnes, did you took it apart, right? Yeah, I took it back. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Now, one thing about this exercise that you guys are doing just as you're sitting here just waiting till we get started is the concept of this exercise is not to bend the nails, okay? Not to use any force and apply pressure. It's just clearly you're doing the best you can by trying to maneuver the nails smoothly apart. Okay. But as you go through this exercise, um, we'll talk about what your experience was like. Okay. So uh, we are okay. So I wanted to just go ahead and start out by telling you guys about myself. My name is Corey Bowler. I am with, of course, Life Changing Christian Center, and one of the members here. And of course, I am the mental health director. And Bishop Valentine, he spoke with me and wanted me to be able to use this platform to provide education as well as information for our members as well as those who are viewing online. So I wanted to start out by doing that, and I want to say I definitely appreciate you guys that's in the house tonight and being present, and thank you guys for that's online that's viewing. So the record, we're going to be recording this evening. I'm going to give you guys about a good 50 minutes, like a therapy session. There's going to be some good information, some good nuggets, and I want you guys to use this opportunity as a platform to be able to kind of open up the floor for a dialogue just to get some clarification on things that are that may have misconception or misconstrued or things that you may have heard from others, but you are unclear about certain things. So now I'll start out by putting people on the spot. We're going to start out by asking two individuals who tried a exercise is a brain teaser. And the brain teaser, I wanted to just try to see you guys' thought process on what your experience was like with this brain teaser. Now we have two other members that's trying to unravel the brain teaser that they have in hand. But in the meantime, we have two individuals that already have successfully went through the brain teaser, and I just wanted to get their thought process on their experience. So I'll start off with my young lady, Miss Carolyn. Miss Carolyn, just kind of share with us like your thought process on you went through the brain teaser. What was it like for you?
Okay, at first I was just twisting, and then I started really thinking about what I was doing. It made me really think hard about what I was doing and looking at the nails and seeing how it was put together. And probably if I had not got it then, I probably would have took it home with me. Probably been up all night trying to get it apart
Right.
because it makes you want to, I don't know, make you want to take it apart.
Sure, sure. And so we also have a young man that just recently took the one you had apart. I'm gonna ask my guy Luther his thoughts on recently taking this brain teaser apart. What's your thoughts, Luther, on the brain teaser? On how did it? What's your thought process?
See, it really make you think, right? Because you're looking at it and the little openings in between both the nails, like your brain sees those and you want to squeeze it through there, but they're bent just small enough to where you can't.
Right.
So looking at that, it made me hold one stationary and then rotate the other one around it until it came out.
Okay. All right. So what I'm gonna also do, because I want to give everybody the opportunity to be able to do the brain teaser, I'm gonna give it to the last person TK. I want her to be able to get an opportunity to try to unravel the brain teaser. It's not hard. It's not difficult. The only rule is try not to use any applied force or pressure to remove this object. Okay. So the common denominator that I've heard this evening was this brain teaser makes you think, right? Is that the common denominator? This brain teaser makes you think. So think about, in regards to the topic for tonight, we're going to talk about the differences between mental health and mental illness. Okay. I was led to do this topic because, of course, I work in a setting that I work with individuals in a hospital setting, and I see a lot of mental illness. But yet, I also see individuals on the outside of outpatient therapy, and I address a lot of mental health concerns or different things that potentially cause individuals to feel overwhelmed or frustrated or whatnot. Kind of like the diagram or the exercise that you guys just are doing or have done, that's how life is. You are continuing to try to unravel, and you're continuing to try to find a way to undo certain situations that either are current or maybe have been in your past. Okay. So that's going to be the focal point of tonight, which is understanding the differences of mental health or versus mental illness. And of course, like I said, my name is Corey Bowler. My credentials, I know a lot of folks like, okay, what does that mean? You have EDS. What EDS is, basically, I went back to school rather than having like you have a lot of people have masters in science. I ended up going above that, and I got something called an educational specialist. It's just an advanced master's degree. I used to tell a lot of people that the advanced master's degree is basically I just did extra paperwork, extra research papers, and because I don't see myself as being kind of like, okay, I'm above someone. I'm just like, hey, I just did it because I wanted to work on licensure stuff. ALC, that's associate's licensed counselor. So what that means is I'm a licensed counselor. However, what I'm doing is I'm studying under someone else's like license, LPC, or LPC supervisor. And so in my case, I'm preparing to take the licensure exam. And once I pass that, then I'll be considered an LPC, a licensed practical counselor. Okay. And then the last one is JSOCC, that's Juvenile Sex Offender Certification Counselor. When I worked at my last employer at Alabama Clinical, I've dealt with adolescents who have went through trauma and experience being, trauma such as physical abuse, sexual abuse. And I went through a week-long training that was condensed down to 1 week. And it was really a whole semester condensed into 1 week. And I learned about far as all these different aspects of young men growing up, being, how they're exposed to different traumatic events and how it turns into them engaging in inappropriate behaviors and things of that nature. And, just dealing with, okay, so we got my man, D, he got his unraveled. All right, so he said it took a long time. Okay. No, you fine. You okay. Okay. But it seemed like to me, kind of like everyone else, it just really made you think, right? Okay. So far as this evening, I put on here the disclaimer. Really, just this evening is for educational purposes only. It's for those who would like to just get information about the topic of the evening, which is, like I said, mental health versus mental illness. Okay. So it's just for educational purposes. And so I just wanted to at least put that up there for people to know that, we're using this mental health platform as a way for us to provide just information for the community and those who would like to know more information. Okay. So moving forward, the first question I want to ask right off the bat, how can someone know his or her mental health has been compromised? Okay. Anybody want to kind of take a wild guess at that, wild or stab at that question. There's no right or wrong answer. Just wanted to ask. Okay.
My initial thought is, like, to me that's kind of a trick question, right? Because I feel some sort of way about like societal norms, but on an individual level, if I feel like my thoughts, emotions, temperament, all of that is on a different echelon than it normally is, then I feel like it's been compromised.
Okay. Anybody else like to add to their thought process as to how does someone know if his or her mental health is being compromised? Okay.
I would say when I'm under a lot of stress and I get to the point where I can't sleep, uh, overeating, uh, forgetfulness, you forget.
And I like what Luther said. He feels like it's typically like a trick question. However, it's a question that should make an individual think about just mental health in general. Because think about it, our brains. Our brains go through so much on a daily. Okay, our brains have to deal with, hey, I got to go to work today. Did I leave the light on? Oh my God, I get a phone call from my kids' school saying that they got in trouble. Alabama Power calling saying that I got to pay a light bill. So your brain is constantly on the go. Oh, I got to go to this meeting at church. Did I do this? Do I do that? So your brain can be in so many directions. But when you talk about just if your brain is ultimately compromised, think about the word compromise or compromised. Compromise basically is just, hey, are you dealing with something that could ultimately impact your thought process? Or so, which what I would, the next slide I would say is something that I wanted to address that I want to talk about before I get into the core of what the presentation was about, was psychological distress. So basically, it this comes from the CDC, where it talks about as a person's mental health is compromised by dealing with unpleasant distress or experiences that includes these different factors. Okay, so the factors that includes, you got your cognitive, that's the way you think right off the bat. If we took the diagram we took the example that you guys had earlier from the from the different the little from the handheld example. It's causing you to think outside the box as to how do I get this apart? Okay, and the best way I can put it is like my wife's uncle had said to me when I was trying to take something apart, like some bed or something. He was like, basically, you are the brains. Don't let this bed do you. Don't let this bed rule you on taking it apart. You should know how to take it apart. Okay? Behavior-wise, distress. So basically what that is saying is ultimately, if you allow your distress to cause you to react out of character, such as becoming aggressive, cursing at someone, hitting someone, then at some point there's going to be some consequences, or there's going to be a way that someone is going to bring to your attention that, okay, you caused the problem. We need to figure out, why are you doing this problem? How is this problem affecting you as far as your workplace, your day-to-day, things of that nature? Okay? And please let me know if I'm going too fast. Please let me know. Yes, sir.
You said a lot of good information, but how do all this stuff come on people?
How does all this stuff, what now?
How do all this come on? Like, for instance, sometimes I work a lot, and when I'm really tired, if somebody bothering me, I might snap,
So that's a good point. So when you asked, how does it come on? There's something in this world, a counseling world, that's called the HALT, right? I could have put it up here, but I didn't have, I had so much on my brain in regards to the direction.
Right.
HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So ultimately, if you are feeling that, so it's no different from, your body is hungry when it gets around 11, 12 o'clock.
Right.
And let's say you're at work and your supervisor says to you, I need for you to do some additional work. And you looking at the watch like, oh, it's 12 o'clock. I got to go to lunch.
Right.
But your supervisor may say, well, sir, ma'am, it's only going to take about 15 minutes. As soon as you're done, you can go you get your lunch. And in your mind, okay, I'm going to knock this out in 15 minutes.
Right.
But guess what? That 15-minute job turns into an hour and a half job. And as you're working, initially you go into the job as a 15-minute mindset, but when it exceeds 15 minutes and it turns into 30 and 45, oh, here we go, an hour and a half.
Right.
You're hungry now. You're real hungry because now your lunch has turned the time that you spent as far as working has transcended over into your lunch hour. But then here we go. You only got maybe an hour left worth of work. But then you have to make a decision. Am I going to continue to go back to work? Am I going to continue to work through my lunch break and just eat as I get off?
Right.
But then here we go. Cognitively, let me drop down. Emotionally, now you're angry. Emotionally, you're ultimately you know what? Don't talk to me. As soon as your supervisor want to say, hey, did you get that up? Listen, don't bother me. Leave me alone. Right. Or you might be very short with your supervisor. Right. And you're hey, Gary, you okay? You got that stuff done? You just look at him like, no, you ain't tell me. And you may have some choice of words that you want to say, but then there could be some level of maturity on your end as to, I don't even want to say what I really want to say, because you're thinking about, hey, you told me 15 minutes,
right? But
this job lasted more than an hour and a half, and now is impeding into my lunchtime. But guess what? I get off at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, so I might as well just wait till I get home. So when we talk about just psychological distress, it affects us as far as cognitively. Then, of course, like I said, the behaviorally, like, you become angry or violent or emotionally. Now, socially, the social aspect could be where in that example that you asked, you're still hungry, but by the time you get home, you might have, like, say, your family that comes to you that might want to talk to you, right. Social interaction.
I got you.
But the problem is you're still hungry. Now you're angry. So you have taken something that is your day-to-day and have brought it home.
Right.
And it can be an individual could be very short with loved ones who have nothing to do with the situation.
Right.
Okay. And so that's typically called displaced anger. When you are angry at one situation, but you allow it to affect you in another situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Good question. Anybody got any other questions? Okay. Now, I put on his spirit. Well, CDC says spiritually. My question to you guys is, how can a person experience spiritual distress? Anybody know or have an idea?
I'm just going to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
I think you can't be like that if you're not doing the things of God. And you really supposed to, like, for instance, you got a routine, you pray every day and you read the word and you're supposed to be doing it. Then when you stop doing it, right. Something's going to happen though.
Right. So spiritual distress could be an example if a person is praying about something in particular.
Right.
However, God doesn't answer our prayers in our time. So on a spiritual aspect, a person can become very angry with God.
Wow.
However, guess what? They still believe, but they're angry.
Right.
And, an example, I had an individual share with me about that their grandparent got mad at them for being in sin. And they took it very hard because the person shared with me that they felt that God spoke through their grandmother to them.
Right.
So how they took that was they felt that as their grandmother kind of like shamed them, they took it personal. and they contemplated killing themselves. Yeah, because at the end of the day, they took their grandmother's word to heart.
Right.
And so the individual shared with me that they are a very spiritual person, that they love God, they go to church. But yet, as we talked about this situation, they acknowledged, well, when I shared with them, I said, well, God is not mad with you. I said, you just really took that very personal and deep. And so what happened is they shared with me that they had someone that was a friend of theirs that invited, because they stopped going to church for a couple of weeks, but he had a friend invited them to come to another church, and they went, and they said that it just felt refreshing to be back in the house of God. So ultimately, spirituality does play a big part, or kind of yet like, Bishop have talked about in churches, you have, people get hurt in church,
Right.
church hurt or
Right.
what have you.
Right.
And so that's why, a lot of people kind of fall away from different ministries, or they bounce around to other ministries and things of that nature. Okay. And then the last one, you got physical nature. Okay. But I wanted to say this because I printed out a definition. I wanted y'all to hear this. So I put up here about psychological distress, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth, and then we'll move on. It says psychological distress is a multitude of unpleasant experiences of cognitive, behavioral, emotional, social, spiritual, and physical natures that may interfere with the ability to cope effectively. Okay. So when you talk about psychological distress, it hinders a person from being able to recognize the options that he or she has in their own life when we're talking about all of these different things that's present. Okay. All right. Anybody got any questions before we move on? None? Good evening. All right. So I wanted to put this up. I wanted to get somebody's take on this diagram. I want y'all to look at this misconception here. This misconception. So it says the common lie that someone tends to say to themselves. Look what it says. Can somebody say it out loud? I'm fine. Do you not know how often I hear that as a therapist? I'm fine. But the problem is, how do you know you're really fine? Okay. Because like I said, it was one day I was driving to work, and I literally felt like, okay, I guess I don't know if it was the Holy Spirit or if it was just me thinking just deep, but I just kind of thought to myself, what if you were fine? How do you know if you really have a problem then? So I kind of just did some reverse thinking. How do you know if you're experiencing a problem? Because ultimately, if you look in the individual on the side here, on the right-hand side that says that they're fine, but do you not see the black darkness? It says help, pain, sad, depression, anger, help me please, fired, I'm not well.
Wow.
And you have this person who is looking as if they, on the outside, they're fine, but on the inside, they're dealing with some issues.
Wow.
So ultimately, I love the shadow because I did read some in one of my books that talked about how we as individuals, we wear a mask, but we have a shadow that really doesn't show us the full picture of who we are as individuals. And I was just like, that's so interesting. So I needed to put that up there because there are misconceptions about, an individual walking around and they're saying that they're in good spirits, or you might meet those who are in church. Hey, I'm highly favored in the Lord, but then you're highly favored, but guess what? You are thinking about your son who just called you from jail, and he's saying, I need some money. And all of a sudden, you're thinking to yourself, well, I can't give you any more money because my lights is about to get cut off. And if you didn't do this, I wouldn't be in this situation. So it causes some friction and causes some anger issues and some anxiety and things of that nature. Okay. All right. Now, so, if anybody was to ask you, are you okay? Make sure you acknowledge that you're all right. All right. That's a good question. Now, she asked, how do you know if you're fine? My question to that would be, how would a person know if they are not? How can a person recognizes that they're dealing with these given areas here? How do you know if you're fine cognitively? Okay. How do you know if you're fine emotionally or socially? Because it's nothing wrong with doing some self-evaluation and checking yourself to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, Corey, are you okay? You sure? There's a lot of nights I've come home and my wife have asked me, you look like you have a lot on your mind. And I'll say, I'm good, I'm fine. But then all of a sudden I'm sitting there, but I'm thinking about something. I have this stern look on my face, but I'm not seeing me. She sees me. So socially, she's trying to bring to my awareness something looks off, something bothers you. But yet I could be thinking about, okay, like far as the type of job I work, I could be thinking about how do I help a blind man see? Okay. This individual does not see a problem with their actions that got them hospitalized. But then ultimately, I'm in a position where, it hit me one day. I was at home. God had really showed me, do you not know how much power you have? You have the power to basically speak life into somebody or tear someone down. You have the power to show them options, or hey, speak so negatively like it hinders their personal development or self-esteem and all that stuff. And so when it comes to me, being in this position, I'm really like, man, I don't want to mess this up at all. This is sacred, So, but it's nothing wrong with doing some self-evaluation and it's nothing wrong with having a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist that you can maybe share. Now, I'm glad that you asked that, because I'm gonna pass this out to you guys. And like I said, I had so much on my brain with trying to do that. I told my wife I'm super nervous. However, I feel like I'm okay. I printed this out at the last minute. It says expectations about therapy. There are 3 things at the top. Listen to what they said. And I read this. I showed this to my coworker today and she laughed. The first one, big breakthroughs. The next one, a lot of crying. And then the last one, my coworker, she laughed at it. She says, and how does this make you feel? That's people's expectations. However, therapy is actually this: learning to look at things from a new perspective, pushing through discomfort, wondering if your therapist's favorite client. Sometimes feeling like there's nothing to talk about. And slowly building a healthy therapeutic relationship. So what I'll do is I'm gonna pass this out because I want you guys to have that, because at the end of the day, in our communities, we as individuals, we don't think therapy is cool. Go ahead. I'm gonna speak.
I love my therapy.
Okay. Sister Zenoria says she loves her therapy. All right. So I wanted to give you guys this because it gives you the opportunity to be able to look at what therapy is really like versus, because I told my coworker today, I laughed at the situation. When I meet people that say, oh, you're a therapist or counselor, well, I need to come sit on your couch. That ain't therapy. That's old school. That's like Sigmund Freud type. But at the same time, therapy has evolved even to telehealth. You can do therapy like literally. You can meet your therapist on your cell phone, and you can talk to your therapist in your car. While I was standing back there, I had 2 clients text me saying, hey, we need to have a session this week. We really got to talk about some stuff. And I was like, man, I'm trying to get ready for a presentation. I was like, sure, that's fine. That's fine. But the thing is, when you're talking about, just mental health in general, it's going to be important to make sure that you find someone that you can feel comfortable with, that you can build a healthy therapeutic relationship with. Yes, sir, Mr. Barnes.
We have a online question.
Okay.
If you feel you don't have anything to talk about, what should you do?
Good. So if you don't have anything to talk about, that's fine. I mean, because even I've been in therapy sessions where I've had nothing to talk about, but that's the great opportunity to build a healthy rapport with someone, because you can learn a lot from people in regards to likes, dislikes, strengths, weaknesses, goals that they want to achieve in the future, or things that's hindering them from their goals. So that's not a bad thing. That's a positive, because you can use that as an opportunity to build that healthy therapeutic relationship, if that makes sense. Okay.
Okay, can I pick it back off of that?
Yes, ma'am.
What if you're a person that, like an introvert, that shy and don't, th- they have something going on, but they
Right.
don't know how to.
Like verbally express it.
Right.
Yeah, that's very common in most cases like that. It's definitely going to be important to get with a clinician that you can build, or you can find, like, okay, do they fit your personality? Is it someone that you can actually open up to? Because even though you have someone who can be introvert,
Mm-hmm.
they can ultimately find someone that can match their personality, that may have initially was an introvert at some point, but they kind of found their way to say, you know what, I like to talk about certain things. And with introverts, they tend to create, like, maybe boundaries where they don't want to share certain things, and that's fine as well. That's where the therapeutic relationship comes in, because you can create these healthy boundaries. It's okay to tell your therapist, I don't want to go down that path right now. We can talk about that later. Let's talk about something that makes me comfortable now. Then later we can talk about this, because do you not know things that maybe you talk about initially can build up, and that's how you work on those relationships and boundaries and things, if that makes sense. All right. I love the questions. Keep them coming. All right. So I just got a few brief facts when it talks about mental health. So really, when I say mental health, it says, this is something I put up there. It says mental health, it affects everyone. Okay. From small children all the way up to, elderly. But it also talks about adults 18 and over with regular feelings of worry, nervousness, anxiety. I want to share some real quick, because I'm trying to be diligent with time. I want to read something real quick. I have found this online that talks about a stress test, and I'm going to read off a few. And it said if you score over 300 points, you automatically be qualified for, like, generalized anxiety. I was like, really? First off the bat, death of a spouse, that's 100 points.
Mm-hmm.
Next one, divorce, 73 points. Marital separation, 65 points. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. Vacations, 13 points. Christmas approaching, 12 points. We are in the Christmas season. Trouble with boss, 23 points. Mortgage over $20,000, 31 points. Foreclosure of a mortgage alone, 30 points. So the points add up. And so it's actually I got it. It says a social readjustment rating scale. This scale is an inventory for most common life stressors, a 43 question. And what it does, it says if a person has 300 points or higher, suggest a high level of stress and chances of developing a stress-related disorder is 80%. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, all the way from pregnancy, retirement, sex difficulties, gain of a new family member, business readjustments, change in financial status, death of a close friend, son or daughter losing a home, trouble with the law. All of those things play a significant factor in regards to someone dealing with stress. Okay. I can let you have it. But what I did was, I was at work and I Googled, I was looking for, like, stress related stuff that I can do in group. And it was just an inventory that I had came across. And I was like, man, and it was a self-assessment, Yeah, I can provide you a copy of this. And then if any of you guys want the PowerPoint, I can send it to you as well. Okay. I worked so hard on this document. All right. The core issue: what is mental health? Includes emotional, psychological, social well-being, but ultimately affects the way you think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how you handle stress and other things. So, like I said before in the beginning, our brain deals with a lot as is. You know, you could be sitting in church thinking about, man, like Bishop said, did I turn them greens off? You know, oh man, I don't get paid till Friday. How am I gonna tithe? You know, oh girl, why she keep calling my phone? She know I'm at church. Those things are in your brain, but then those are day-to-day things that, you know, at some point you have to know how to create boundaries and structure and stop things that is within your control. Okay, if you have the opportunity to do so. Okay. Any questions? Miss Sister Nori looking like she want to ask. Nothing. Okay. Gotcha. So this comes from the CDC as well. Mental. So, and when you talk about the way you think, feel, and act, you have therapists who take different therapeutic approaches that focus more on something that's called cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the way you view a situation, how it affects the way you think, how you feel, how you behave, and you look at, are there any distorted thoughts or any distortions on how you think about situations, and, you know, could you make any changes to your day-to-day life? Okay. All right, so Minister Barnes, I'm show a video for us. I want you guys to take a minute to watch this. It's real quick. It's like 5 minutes, but it's very interesting. Minister Barnes, you think you can? Let me see. Did we set up the video? Oh, God. I thought I had it on here, but I guess I did. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, if we can't share the video, it's fine. What I'll do is I'll go straight. I can skip that. If you want to get the video at the end, that'll be fine. If you don't work on that now. But so I wanted to talk about psychological labeling. Here's another one. Look at the young man with a smile on his face, but then on the inside, look at his brain. You have a young kid who looks very alone. He looks very sad, looks depressed or guarded. But then ultimately, when you talk about psychological labeling, basically that is a big no-no. You know, one thing as a society, and, you know, we come across individuals who make statements and they don't think about what they say. You know, people will say things like, man, she crazy. You know, or he got some issues, you know, or he's psycho. You know, I like the other one. Blacks or whites suffering from mental health. You know, especially when you look at like the news and then they'll depict a certain situation where, like, I don't know if any of y'all thought when the DC sniper happened, you know, people probably thought, oh, that's a white man. Right. But then when you see the actual shooter, you like, what? It was an African American. Right. And so the other one, it says you are choosing to be depressed. Any of you all ever heard of any other potential labeling? Like, and when I say labeling, that's a big no-no, but we definitely need to know how to be culturally sensitive to those who are dealing with mental health, okay? Because it's so easy for us to maybe come up and try to give them a hug and it's okay, we're gonna fix the problem. But no, you know, we have to let people grow and develop in their own timing. Yes, sir.
I'm glad I came.
You good?
I'm getting a lot of good information, but do this got something to do with spiritual, mental health? When people, like, for instance, you going down the street and you see somebody talking to themselves or eating out the trash can or just going crazy. Right. And like for us, we get close and we scared of them. But that's why I think, is this something that got something to do with spiritual though?
Well, that's more. So that's more on when you talk about someone who could be maybe talking to themselves.
Right.
That's more on the mental illness side.
All right.
Because you have people who can be such as like schizophrenia,
Right.
schizoaffective. They could be manic. They could be like bipolar 1, bipolar 2,
All right.
where they are talking to themselves. Trust me. I'll give you an example. I was at work today. I was minding my business, about to get ready to go. I had a staff member say, "Hey, Mr. Corey, let me tell you something that's weird that just happened." I'm like, "Okay, hurry up." The guy said, "This girl just came to me and said that she want me to get it right with Vladimir Putin because she feel like I'm a Russian spy and I can go back and talk to him." I said, "Huh?" And I looked at her like, "Okay." And then so I said, "All right." I said, "Well, did you get it straightened out with Vladimir Putin?" Before I left, I said that to him. He was like, "Yeah, she keep coming to me saying I'm a Russian spy." Well, when you have mental illness, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but when you have mental illness, a lot of individuals, or majority of the individuals, are very delusional in their thoughts, disorganized in their thinking. And so when you have someone who's walking around talking to themselves, in their mind, they believe that they're having that conversation, But guess what? Don't treat them no different, You just treat them the same and go on about your life because guess what? Let me show you something. Look at this. Mental illness is a health condition that involves changes in someone's emotional, cognitive, the way you think and your behavior, or a combination. So you have these things such as depression, anxiety, bipolar, or even schizophrenia, and it goes on. And so I brought this here because when a person goes to therapy, the therapists use this. This is called the DSM.
Right.
And actually it's updated. This is a DSM-5. They actually have a 5.5 now. But the clinical therapists use this, and it has everything in here from alcohol addiction alcohol dependency to caffeine withdrawals to ADHD, oppositional defiance. It has everything, When I first started out, a lot of, when I took this class, a lot of people was like, "All right, now don't try to go through your family and diagnose everybody in your family." But people there are different things in here that people have certain traits. Like I just opened it up. The first thing it says panic attack. Panic attack specifiers. Right off the bat. Palpitation, sweating, trembling, sensations of shortness of breath, feelings of choking, chest pain, nausea, feeling dizzy, chills, or heat sensation. That could be any of us. That could be any of us. Check this out. I'm sweating now. Okay. Heart palpitation. What if I'm nervous? I meet 2 criteria right off the bat. But am I having a panic attack? No, not. But on here, as a therapist, it defines and to say if a person meets like 4 out of 20, they meet that criteria. Or if a person meets 5 out of 10, they meet this criteria. That's how we narrow it down.
Right.
In regards to and I don't know about, I didn't put it up here, but I wanted to say in regards to mental illness, the only individuals that can diagnose would be a medical doctor, a psychologist, a medical doctor, psychologist, psychiatrist, LPCs, they give I lost my train of thought. They don't diagnose. LPCs don't diagnose. We just give I forgot the name of what it's called. But an impressions. You give an impression. Basically, you can say from a clinical standpoint, this is what you see. But if you have that individual to go to his or her physician, the physician can, the therapist could consult with the doctor to say, these are the different things that I have seen within the individual that makes them think that it is bipolar or schizophrenia, things of that nature. Okay. Mr. Barnes, you didn't have a video up, did you? Huh? Oh, okay. All right. One. So, anybody got any questions about mental illness so far? Yes, ma'am.
Because one thing that I've noticed for years, anything dealing with the mind, the church labeled it as demonic.
Right.
And how do we
A lot of labor.
get them to that point where just because something's going on with your mind is not necessarily demonic?
Right. That's where. That's a really great question. I really believe that could be the vision where Bishop felt the need to break that stigma, because not everything is demonic.
Right.
You have situations where we're going to have people that's going to be in this ministry that have a disorder. Can I be honest with you? My son, Caden, has ADHD. My wife and I have had multiple talks, and she made a comment to me that I wanted to just give her credit. She said there are mental health things that are visible and invisible. Invisible mental health things. And at the end of the day, here we go. I mean, you don't treat anyone differently because he or she has, bipolar. Right. Can I be honest with you? Let's move on. Let me show you, because I got to show you. Look at this. Familiar faces with mental illnesses.
Right. Wow.
Familiar faces.
Wow.
And so I was reading this to my wife last night. Like I said, I had so much stuff. I was reading this to my wife last night. Abraham Lincoln, 16th U.S. president. He suffered from severe suicidal depressions. Okay. Winston Churchill, prime minister. He suffered from severe and serious depression. Virginia Woolf, British novelist. She was faced with suicide. Causes death determines suicide. The list goes on. John Nash, Nobel Peace Prize mathematician. He suffered from schizophrenia. William Styron, author, writer. He wrote about his own depression in a book called Darkness Visible. It's a lot of people. Okay, and I'll show y'all these pictures. John Nash, mathematician, Nobel Peace Prize. He has schizophrenia. Okay. Vincent van Gogh, artist, major depression. John Denver, musician, he had depression. Brian Wilson, the musician, had depression. Abraham Lincoln, depression. Patty Duke, actress, she had bipolar. Richard Dreyfuss, actor, bipolar disorder. Sylvia Plath, poet, bipolar. Charles Darwin, scientist, had OCD, oppositional compulsive disorder. Beyonce Knowles, singer, depression. Leonardo DiCaprio, actor, oppositional compulsive disorder. Albert Einstein, scientist, oppositional compulsive disorder. I mean, and the list goes on. Robin Williams is on this list. Sting, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is very open about his mental health, okay, or mental illness. Martin, the comedian. Michael Jackson is up there. The list goes on, okay? So the thing is, when you have individuals that suffer from mental illness, guess what? It's fine. You can still function normally. You can still go to work. And I know you guys are probably wondering, well, how does a person get out of whack, or how do they get to that place of just losing it? Anybody know the common denominator? Well, from what I see, I can tell you. What y'all think? What do you think is the common thing that causes individuals to maybe go back and suffer from a mental illness issue that gets them off track for a short moment? Well, there's a couple things I'll say. Anybody?
Stress.
Well, if I was to tell you something simple, a person don't even take their meds,
Don't take their meds.
not taking the medication,
Right. Right.
a person feeling in their mind that they are okay without their medicine. That plays a humongous factor. Do you not know how many people I see on a daily that they'll go weeks without their meds, but it's not their fault. The best way I can explain is this. You are hospitalized for a mental illness, right? But then life happens. Change in job. You was making some good money, change in job. Now you don't make as much as you were before, but you still take your medicine. Your medicine plays a factor into your finances. Your medicine is maybe $150 for 90 days. This is give an example. But yet, when you was previously working at your old employer, you can afford that without any issues with insurance and everything, and it wasn't that much. You changed jobs. Now you don't make as much. Your medicine hasn't changed. But so what you do is, in your mind, I'll be fine without my meds, so you don't take your meds for a day. You go fine. You take your meds for 2 weeks. You fine. But then it goes back to someone here say, man, he crazy. Something wrong with her. And in your mind, you probably thinking, no one cares about me, that little boy. Or go back here, I'm fine. But then all of a sudden, someone's trying to bring your attention psychologically or socially. Are you okay? When the last time you went to the doctor? I don't need no doctor. I'm fine. Wow. You know?
Don't, right. People say that I don't need no doctor. I'm all right. They be in denial or something. And just say this here. If another person see another person, something ain't right with them, and then you trying to get them some help, you say, man, leave me alone. I'm fine. You get what I'm saying, Corey?
That happens a lot.
Right.
You know, I actually just had I had a young lady reach out to me who wanted me to do marriage therapy with her and her husband.
Right.
And she was sharing with me her concerns. And I was like, I told her typically it's important that the female have their own therapist, the male has his own therapist. Now we can bring them together when the therapists feel like it's time for them to reconcile their differences, because marriage therapy is complicated. All right. So that's the best case scenario. So I told the lady that, and she said, okay, well, I'm going to call my husband because I really feel like he needs a therapist, and I want you to be his doctor. Okay. I said, tell him to give me a call. He called. I went by my phone at the time. He left a voicemail. I called him back. His response was, he said, yes, sir. My wife wanted me to call you. Disregard the call. I said, can you repeat that again? Because I want to make sure I heard what you said. Disregard this call. My wife wanted me to call you. Don't worry about it. Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Hung up. I called the wife. I didn't tell her nothing what this husband said. That's all he said to me. Right. He didn't bash his wife for nothing. Right. And the only thing that I felt like as a therapist was, your husband is not ready. Right. That's it. As therapists, you got to meet people where they are. Right. He's not ready. And you should have heard in her voice. She said, really? Are you serious? I really wanted him to get some help. Then she goes on, started telling me more about what's going on in marriage. And in my mind, I'm for the bill you for this. You're talking my ear off. I literally was on the phone with her for probably about a good 30, 40 minutes. But I was taking care of other responsibilities at home. Right. So I wasn't bothered by nothing. But I was like, man, I really could bill your butt for this. So, yeah. So you got that. So the Center for Disease and Control Prevention states that individuals mental health individuals. I like this comment because I want y'all to see this. Mental individual poor or mental health individual poor mental health have been formally diagnosed with a mental illness. Many people who have a diagnosis of mental illness can be experiencing periods of physical, mental, and social well-being. A lack of understanding or mischaracterization of a mental health problem can discourage people from getting needed treatment. Okay. So basically what I was trying to say in that first category is you have people who can go through society with not being properly diagnosed. Like you said, you could walk past someone and instantly someone they're talking to themselves. And in your mind, man, they may need some help. But when you try to address them, they may not have properly been diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever the diagnosis may be. Because they probably couldn't afford getting the therapy or going to a doctor to start the process. Right. But then what about those who fall between the cracks, who don't get the help at all? Here we go. You got a kid who go through school and pandemic hit. The pandemic calls for kids to not read on their grade level. They're in the first grade. Statistics says you need to know how to read by the third grade, or if you don't, you're gonna wind up in prison. So first grade, you're on a preschool level of reading. But guess what? The teachers decide to pass you to the second grade. You go to second grade, but you're still on a preschool level of reading. Now, the kid goes home. Kid is like number 5 out of about all the kids. He's the baby. He or she is the baby. And then all of a sudden, he's being bullied at school, lack of food, nutrition at home. Oh, he don't know how to read. Mom and dad are always working. What do you think can happen? As this child get older, self-esteem is low, anger issues, fighting at school. Then all of a sudden, he grows older. He's sexually abused by a loved one. Mama or daddy don't believe it. You go through life, he's very sexual promiscuous, sleeping around with multiple women, 5 kids himself. Guess what? He works at a temp job trying to make ends meet. But he want to buy the latest fashion of clothes. He wants to look the stylish. He's always out drinking with friends. But at the end of the day, the only time that real help comes to his aid is when, let's say DHR get involved when he leaves the child at the house by him or herself when he go to the store and somebody knock on the door and they realize that the kid's in the house by themselves. Now DHR come in and take the children. He's labeled as a bad parent. He may not be a bad. He didn't have the necessary means when he was young. So it's passed down to generation to generation. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. And then here we go. They call myself, Mr. Core, I need you to I need you to talk to this guy. He's in Shelby County Jail. And he needs a therapist. And then I find out that it's a generational thing. And then when I talk to him, my dad wasn't around. Really? And then all of a sudden you find out, Mom, she worked 3-4 jobs. He got 5 kids, just like his mama got 5 kids. And it just something that he learned as he went through life. He just learned to just adapt to life. He never had any real structure, any guidance. Okay. We had 2 videos, but we didn't get them going. But that was the end of my presentation. I did an hour. Wow. I gave y'all the best of me within an hour. But Minister Barnes said someone had a question. Okay. Minister Barnes said if you guys wanted to pull out your phone, if you want to view the videos, it's 2 videos. One in perspective that talks about how Asian Americans tend to value mental health over other cultures, and how they did research that felt like Asian Americans really like they value their mental health and
About 21% of the general population has been identified as having some form of mental health condition, but among Asian Americans, that number is far lower. It's not because they're any less affected, though. As Christina Quinn tells us, a new study finds a glaring disparity between whites and Asians when it comes to mental health diagnosis and treatment.
When psychiatrist Xiaodou Fan was working at Mass General Hospital, he started to see a pattern.
I noticed that Asian Americans rarely present to the outpatient setting to seek mental health care.
It was more common to find them in the emergency room or inpatient hospitalization. Fan wanted to know why. So he and his team of researchers at UMass Medical School examined over 360,000 patient records. They found that whites were more than twice as likely to be diagnosed with mental health disorders than Asian Americans. And even among those diagnosed, whites were twice as likely to receive medication. Fan says a couple things account for this huge disparity.
From the patient side, it is related to the culture and
diagnosis, especially those who have a fear of being misdiagnosed.
Yeah. So that's where first off, you consult, you talk with you schedule an appointment with your medical doctor if you have one. But then if you have a medical doctor that you can talk to, you can open up that conversation and say, hey, I really, I want to get a diagnosis, but I want to be properly diagnosed, and having that physician to do their own research of people who they are aware that they can point you in the direction of someone that can get you that get you to properly diagnosed. But then at the same time, if you don't have a medical doctor, like a primary doctor that you have, then the avenue might be a little bit challenging because, it's not just walking into a person's office, hey, I need a diagnosis. But at the same time, it might be, they might ask you, okay, well, what are some of your concerns that that you view that needs to be a diagnosis behind the concerns that you have? So I can work on getting you some names of like physicians or like psychiatrists or psychologists that can actually point you in the direction that you're trying to go with that, if that's something you're trying to do personally. What's the second part?
Second part of that question. One thing I've noticed about people with, I don't like the term mental illness, but with mental illnesses, especially those who have lived with it for a long time, there's, I don't know how to accurately phrase this, but we're real good at pretending, right? So there's this certain societal facade that we put on in public to seem normal.
Like a chameleon.
Yeah.
I get it.
So I guess during that process, how does someone go about like letting down that facade and just opening up and accurately expressing themselves?
And that's where that goes back to, like I mentioned before, really finding the right person that you feel like you can build that relationship with. It takes time. And the best way I can put it is like of course I like cooking, Thanksgiving around the corner, but you think about like a crock pot. When you plug a crock pot in, it ain't automatically turned on and hot. But what it is when you plug it into the wall, but as you turn it on to its setting, either low, medium, or high, it has to still warm up over time. So when you talk about a person having a guard up, because trust me, I see it every day. And I mean, the stories that I tell my wife of like how guarded people be, and like, I just be myself. I treat them how they are. And then all of a sudden, when I walk through the hospital, hey, Corey, I had a girl tell me, you're my favorite therapist. And I looked at her, I was like, oh, okay. When is that? I just met you yesterday. And so, but the thing is, finding a person that, far as a clinician, a mental health therapist, or a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or a social worker, whomever, someone that can really meet your needs where you are, because not everything is just, hey, let's talk about this issue. Man, you can have therapy just shooting pool with somebody. And I don't know how I did it, but I had a kid that I saw that I started out talking about pizza. And all of a sudden it turned into him opening up, talking about how his mom abused him, and he boo-hooing, crying. And he felt like I tricked him because we were talking about pizza. I said to him, I didn't trick you. You opened up that conversation. I was just listening. Right. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. If y'all want to if y'all got a few minutes, it's 5 minutes. This the first one. Hey, we'll just do one. This the first one. If you want, Minister Barr, you got the volume? What the volume is?
As Christina Quinn tells us, a new study finds a glaring disparity between whites and Asians when it comes to mental health diagnosis and treatment.
When psychiatrist Xiaodou Fan was working at Mass General Hospital, he started to see a pattern.
I noticed that Asian Americans rarely present to the outpatient setting to seek mental health care.
It was more common to find them in the emergency room or inpatient hospitalization.
About 21% of the general population has been identified as having some form of mental health condition, but among Asian Americans, that number is far lower. It's not because they're any less affected, though. As Christina Quinn tells us, a new study finds a glaring disparity between whites and Asians when it comes to mental health diagnosis and treatment.
When psychiatrist Xiaodou Fan was working at Mass General Hospital, he started to see a pattern.
I noticed that Asian Americans rarely present to the outpatient setting to seek mental health care.
It was more common to find them in the emergency room or inpatient hospitalization. Fan wanted to know why. So he and his team of researchers at UMass Medical School examined over 360,000 patient records. They found that whites were more than twice as likely to be diagnosed with mental health disorders than Asian Americans. And even among those diagnosed, whites were twice as likely to receive medication. Fan says a couple things account for this huge disparity.
From the patient side, it is related to the culture and the enormous sense of stigma and shame related to mental illness in Asian cultures. But also, in many hospitals, there is a lack of cultural competency.
Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority group in the U.S. Despite that, they are largely underrepresented in the mental health care profession. And like other minorities, they're less likely to use community mental health services.
In Asian culture in general, sharing the feelings or psychological experience in general are not encouraged. So that's why for people who grew up in Chinese or in the Asian cultures, they may not develop that vocabulary to describe their emotional experiences or feelings.
Susanna Yi can relate. Her immigrant parents often juggled multiple jobs while raising her and her brother in Dorchester. Even when there was time to talk, they didn't talk about feelings.
Mental health was definitely not at the top of the list. It was getting food on the table, making sure bills were paid, and making sure we could get to school on time.
It wasn't until she was in college that she learned about counseling after her father had died suddenly and then her grandfather passed away.
But I didn't know there was a doctor there for your mental health. It seemed like really foreign to me, but I was like, oh, that's pretty handy. I'm open-minded. Like, I'll try it out.
Shortly after college, Yi's mother died from cancer. All this loss over the span of 5 years left her reeling. But she says seeing her Chinese-American therapist regularly has given her the tools to cope.
I would like for people to have more of an open conversation about it. I feel like the stigma is you should only see one if you're crazy or you're sick.
There's growing emphasis on understanding stigma and the values of other cultures in hospitals across the U.S. In 2015, the American Hospital Association launched a campaign to eliminate healthcare disparities. Mass General joined 1,500 hospitals in this pledge and tells WGBH News it continues to ramp up its cultural competence training. UMass Medical School has also made it part of its curriculum. Xiaodou Fan is cautiously optimistic, but says there's a long way to go.
I have seen so many Asian Americans suffer from mental illness, but they are kind of remain or kind of an underground, remain in this dark tunnel to struggle, and always not enough resources, but there are resources available.
Available for those who are willing to step out of the darkness and give it a try.
Christina Quinn joins me now. Hey, Christina.
Hi, Jim. Good
We're
thanks.
twice as likely is a huge disparity, but what I don't understand is why is there such a big disparity with medication even after there's a diagnosis? I don't get that at all.
Right. Well, the stigma is still a part of that. There's an unwillingness to want to take medication. There's also skepticism of Western medication. I think a lot of it depends on who you ask. If you're speaking with immigrants who prefer holistic or alternative medicine.
So it's more on the patient end than the prescribing end.
Not necessarily, though. So, and then again, the cultural competence. So, a patient will come in and just won't feel comfortable taking it, and there'll be something will get lost in the communication, and that's really.
Are there
hard
other
to do.
comparable disparities with other
Yes.
minority groups?
Yeah, I mean, this runs across the board for Latinos and blacks as well. There are major disparities, and there's a stigma that runs throughout a lot of racial and ethnic minority groups. Yeah.
This cultural competence thing, schools and all that is great, but it seems to me there's got to be more. Is there a function for Department of Public Health or some other set of entities?
That would be nice. Public health departments, I think, are usually cash strapped. I did reach out to the State Department of Mental Health, and they are, there's a health fair coming up soon, and they're going to be involved. They have said that they've put efforts towards reaching out to this community, but it's a tough community to reach out to. I think a lot of it has to do with there are not enough resources, and the stigma sort of perpetuates this quiet treatment of mental health.
Important piece. Thank you, Christina. It's
Thanks,
good to see you.
Jim.
I really appreciate it. Christina Quinn.